Welcome. What a way to start a Saturday morning with a number of patients and physicians and scientists and researchers. This has really become quite a community that we've are involved with the ADTKD team here at the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. Welcome to the 4th annual International ADTKD Summit. And the topic that we've developed this year is "The Time Is Now, Uniting to Halt ADTKD." It was really Dr. Anna Greca's brainchild back in 2020 when we started these international summits. This is being presented today by the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation, a nonprofit foundation. It's a patient advocacy partner of the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. I've found Anna and her Greca Lab colleagues to be deeply committed to patients, more than I've seen in many other organizations. We're extremely fortunate to have this partnership and many others that we'll discuss today. I discovered that I had a genetic disease nearly 40 years ago and received a miracle transplant 34 years ago from a 17-year-old girl in upstate New York. To continue our story as part of this introduction, I lost my father, Roscoe, at age 40, when he was 43. He was a young surgeon with a young family of 6 children. And recently, I lost my angel sister, Marcia Ann, 20 years on dialysis, and a younger brother, Doug. I retired 7 years ago to work on helping accelerate a treatment. The Nelson family disease has obviously impacted our family a great deal because of a mutant gene, a MUC1 gene. Now, more importantly than the history is what's going on now. There are 8 next generation cousins. My 5 children and 16 of their cousins have a 50% chance of getting this disease. And we suspect that there's at least 8 that are already in kidney failure. And as I look at it, it's this disease started with 1, my dad, actually many generations before that, and then went to 4 of us, siblings, his children, and now 8 of the grandchildren. I'd like to introduce our foundation. We're all volunteers. It's a patient-focused, patient-driven nonprofit, as I mentioned. Finding a treatment to halt ADTKD is really the holy grail that we work on for genetic diseases like MUC1 and UMOD. Surprisingly, 75,000 to 100,000 patients in the US have recently been discovered, and hundreds of thousands of suffering families are dealing with these diseases worldwide. Astonishingly, over 95% of physicians, nephrologists are not aware of this disease or a potential treatment that the Broad and Wake Forest and others are working on. Here's an interesting fact from 2 large foundations. 30 to 40% of 700,000 people on dialysis don't know why, nor do their physicians. And then an estimated 10% of nephrologists' genetic patients are not easily diagnosed. We're developing this discussion today around the Foundation's top priority, and that's finding patients for a clinical trial. We're working closely with Dr. Tony Blair at Wake Forest and his team. Last year's goal was to find 60 patients from our foundation standpoint. We found 63. They're not easy to find, as Dr. Blair knows well. Finding patients for the Broads affiliate NUCO to take a promising drug-like compound to the FDA that could halt these diseases is really the holy grail of what we're working on. Action for us as patients. We'd like to have you consider talking to your nephrologist and their clinic about genetic testing and about the hope that has come as a result of the recent findings and the decades-long work from physician scientists. So please contact your nephrologist. And so from a housekeeping standpoint, let's just go through this. We're going to have Q&A after each of the discussions. There'll be questions you can present in the Q&A at the bottom of the box. My apologies now for interrupting to keep us on schedule. We have a tight schedule. We're not able to take personal medical questions, and I think that covers it. And we're recording this, and it'll be on our website. Okay, I want to introduce a dear friend, a fellow kidney patient and influential national kidney patient advocate, Paul Conway. He'll give welcoming remarks about the patient's critical role in kidney disease. Paul is a past president of the American Association of Kidney Patients. He's the current chair of policy and global affairs. We became instant brothers years ago when we first met on the national PKD board. Paul is likely the top or the #1 kidney patient advocate in the country, and he's really had a great impact on policy, advising various organizations, including being involved with the FDA and National Institutes of Health and administrations. Most fortunately, we have him as a member of our Rare Kidney Disease Board. Paul, you got a good smile on there. Why don't you take it away?
You bet. Thank you very much, Richard, and thanks for everyone who's participating on Saturday. This is a very optimistic enterprise, and as patients, we're all in, and we're all in for a lot of different reasons, but the purity of the mission of this foundation is important for everyone to think about, I think. And Richard, you and I have been in the arena for a decade under various hats, but I thought it might be important for folks to have some context for how bold the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation really is. You stood this foundation up at a moment in time when patients have asserted themselves with laurels and sometimes a lot of scars and bruises to be equal partners at the table for research and medical innovation. And it's important for folks to understand that just a decade ago, that was not the case. But as we're seeing the explosion of precision medicine, greater research in the kidney space, the thing that it comes down to is where is the demand for it? And increasingly, organizations like FDA and NIH and Congress and the executive branch, they want to know who the people are. And that's why it's so important that advances in particular diseases and rare diseases are great, but unless you can put families and communities with them, you don't see the same impetus for change. And that's one of the things that you've been able to do. And as you'll see from the program, obviously yesterday and today, this is a very patient-focused organization. It's organized on certain principles. Number one, that the patient voice is the most important stakeholder at the table. Number two, expanding care choice is critically important. And number three, as they say, nothing about us without us, that patients have an important role to play in innovation. And so those are kind of our anchoring principles. And the thing that then comes next is the question is, what's the mission? And our mission is pure. Our mission is about taking people whose lives and livelihoods are impacted by these diseases, and this disease in particular, and being able to give voice to all the work that researchers are doing, all the work that investors will be doing, and most importantly, down the road, because it's a long-term enterprise, you have to think about how we will bring our voices before the FDA and ultimately before payers, whether that's CMS or private insurers, once the therapy is in place. And that's why it's such a joy, Richard, to work with you. Our common background, I got my kidney transplant 28 years ago from a young 16-year-old person who was killed in a car accident. And I think so many of us that are participating today in a lot of different organizations, we feel a moral responsibility to give back and to reduce the burdens that other might experience. And that's kind of what draws us in to do something bigger than ourselves. But the time is really right now. And as you said, Richard, setting that as a theme, it kind of also invites the question of if not us, who? And if not now, when? And this is why it's so important that you've stood this up as an organization that's open to people to come into, to really drive and stand behind the researchers that are pioneering the therapies. And it's just a pleasure to be with fellow patients in building a community and giving voice to that. Because as Richard said, this is a subset of patients that, save for having a foundation to have structure for the voice, those voices might have been lost. But that's not going to be the case, hasn't been the case now for several years, and it's definitely not going to be the case going forward. So it's just a pleasure to see you, and it's a pleasure to participate today in a very optimistic Saturday.
Thank you very much, Paul. You can see why Paul's been so effective over the years and going forward with us. Thank you very much, Paul.
You bet. Thank you.
We're going to turn to patient voices, since this is all about the patient and finding a way to support the incredible work that is going on. I'd like to introduce Julia Chester. Dr. Chester is a neuroscientist and a professor at Purdue University, volunteers with our foundation, most fortunately as part of the ambassador program to help spread awareness of ADTKD, especially among medical professionals. Remember, if you have questions for Julia or others, please submit it in the box at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A box, and that will come up after the presentation. Julia, take it away.
Hello. Excuse me. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm just going to speak for a few minutes today about my family's journey with discovering that we have the MUC1 mutation in our family line. I myself do not have the gene, so I am speaking on behalf of really my mother, who has the MUC1 gene and is in end-stage renal failure. And I want to tell a little bit about our family story, which I'm sure is similar to many people's stories. My mom was going in for a routine blood test to take a medication, and that's how she discovered that her kidney function was compromised. And at that time, there was no known cause for that. She had no other symptoms. There was no symptoms. There was nothing else that was possibly causing her kidney function. So it was something that was just a thing, and the doctors were monitoring it. Over time, the families, she has a large family with many siblings, 13 siblings in the family, and then she has another cousins that have another large family, 14 siblings. And both of the parents of these families passed away at a young age, and not due to kidney issues. So it was not known that there was any sort of family history of kidney function problems or anything like that. So the family members started sharing their stories with each other and say, "Oh, I've got kidney issues. Oh, so do I," and this went on for years and years, and people never knew why they had these issues, and they started suspecting, okay, well, there must be some sort of genetic connection here. Fast forward, somehow, one of my mom's first cousins found Dr. Blyer, and it's because of him and sharing the information with our families that we then became patients and got tested for the gene, and now we know that it's the MUC1 mutation that people are carrying. And I am very passionate about this issue, obviously, because it personally touches my family. And it's also something actually that I coincidentally have experience with in my job. I work with identifying treatments for polygenic disorders, and which are more difficult to find treatments for. But I'm a scientist, and I'm very passionate about finding treatments for genetic disorders. And so, in addition to a scientific interest, I also have, a personal interest, and I am volunteering with RKDF for the purposes of reaching physicians, spreading awareness about this, rare genes that are circulating in the population that amazingly so many physicians know nothing about. They have no idea, and they need to know in order to improve patients' opportunities for treatment, clinical course over time. It's been quite frustrating with my mom, and so talking with the doctors who oftentimes put her in categories for treatment that are really not relevant for her because she doesn't have any of the other comorbidities or issues that oftentimes other patients with different types of chronic kidney disease have. And it's been a struggle for sure. So I'm really excited about getting started with the ambassador program and spreading information and finding patients who can go into clinical trials so we can get a treatment and we can help future generations. So thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I think I'm there. I'm here someplace. Okay, I'm here. Thank you. That was you're helping to relive many of our stories. I have MUC1 also. But what we've done with the foundation is create hope about halting this disease. I think there really is hope. Let's have a second voice, and like to introduce Angela Watt, is a retired renal nurse and UMOD patient. She's a trustee and a kidney research with the Kidney Research of the United Kingdom, the largest charity in the UK that funds research. She's focused on preventing, treating, and managing kidney disease. And Angela is, like I mentioned, a UMOD patient, and she'll tell us her story.
Thank you, Rich, and good morning, everybody. Good afternoon from here in the UK. Thank you for the opportunity to share mine and my family's story about ADTKD, and I'm sure it's no different to all of your stories out there. So in a nutshell, I can trace my family back 5 generations who suffered from kidney disease. We know that my great-grandmother died of nephritis and uremia. That's on her death certificate that we have. My grandmother and her sister both had kidney failure in the 1980s and had transplants, one of them successfully, one not successfully. My mum developed kidney failure in the year 2000 and then passed away in 2013. But at that point, we still didn't have a diagnosis for what was going on in the family. All we were ever told was some sort of nephritis. And then in 2006, my youngest son was diagnosed with CKD. At the time, his DGFR was only 40. And his was due to a very bad case of reflux. So we thought that that had been the case all along. And I think that was the point I realized I wasn't going to escape it. But nobody was ever able to find the cause, the genetic cause of reflux. So we were just left with a waiting game. And then I developed CKD myself around 2014. And at that time, we ended up meeting with Professor John Sayre, who I think will be on the call today. He's a consultant nephrologist here in Newcastle in England, and he specializes in inherited kidney diseases. So the first thing that John did was enter myself and my son into a project here in the UK called the 100,000 Genomes Project. And that project looked to map the genomes of 100,000 people with rare diseases without a genetic cause. And we sat back and we waited a few years and we never got anything. And eventually they said, no, we couldn't find anything, sorry. But then John is quite tenacious and he said, I'm going to get the data back myself and have a look. And then in 2020, he messaged me and said, I think I'd found something. And that was the first time that I heard about UMOD ADTKD. So that kind of changed the outlook at first. We thought, well, at least we've got a reason for it. But then I soon realized, but actually there's no cure. And as well as my youngest son, I had 2 older children. And at the time they'd been looked into for the reflux and told that they didn't have it. So we thought they were clear, but obviously this changed everything. So they were both adults at the time. They both chose to be tested because that's available here in the UK quite easily. And they both carry the gene. So I know we talk about the 50-50 chance of carrying it, but all 3 of my children carry the gene. And a few years down the line, we're still in that situation. My youngest son has since reached end-stage kidney failure. He received a kidney transplant from my husband, and he's doing really well. My 2 older children so far have no symptoms, but they get monitored every year. And I have just reached end-stage kidney failure myself. I'm in the process of starting on dialysis myself at the moment. As far as other family members go, I have first cousins who were tested. Luckily, they don't carry the gene, so it hasn't gone down that side of the family. My brother does, and he now has CKD as well. We also contacted some remoter members of the family. So my grandmother's sister, who we knew had had the transplant, who passed away, we knew we were in contact with one of her children who'd had some medical problems. He got tested and he carried the gene, but he didn't have the CKD. He has the juvenile gout that often comes with UMOD. And his daughter also got tested and she has CKD, but not the gout. So it can change as well within families. And Dr. Holly Mabillard, who we heard about yesterday, is doing a lot of work into why that might be the case. So background, as I said, I spent 20 years working as a renal nurse, mainly in the hemodialysis setting, but in latter years also with another ultra-rare kidney disease called AHUS that some of you may have heard of. but my 16 years working in hemodialysis has made me see, you know, how difficult dialysis is and how important it is to keep people from renal replacement therapy if we can. And that's why I'm passionate about finding a cure for this condition. So thank you for the opportunity to talk. Thank you for sharing your stories. It's been an incredibly interesting 2 days. Thank you.
Now, these two stories are very familiar and really heart-breaking. Let's turn it over to Kathy for some questions.
Thank you, Rich. We have a question from Bonnie. She wants to know, how can patients and families get involved to spread the word to nephrologists? That could be for Angela or Julia or both.
Well, I'll mention that we are just getting started with the ambassador program. So I literally just 2 days ago, I received the physician pamphlets that we are going to be distributing to physicians all over the country. Eventually, you know, that's the goal, is to just basically get in where this information wherever we can, but we just are starting, and we're starting small. And our plan is to just literally contact every nephrologist that we can, starting in our local communities and spreading out from there. So if, you know, people are absolutely, we welcome anyone who is interested in obtaining these pamphlets and talking to physicians, and we'd love to have you, you know, join the ambassador team if you'd like to, or just at least hear about how we're going, and how things are going with this process, because we've just started, so we don't really know, you know, how the reception is going to be. That's definitely going to be variable, and potentially difficult to actually get access to physicians and spread this information. But we're excited to try different techniques to spread the information.
I think here in the UK, as Rich mentioned, I'm a patient trustee at Kidney Research UK, and I just take the opportunity every time I'm asked if I would come and share my story at an event or a meeting to go and do it and talk about it, because it's often scientists and nephrologists in the room. Just tell them my story. And, you know, when you list the amount of people that are affected by it in one family, I think it brings that home to them.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions we have right now.
One of you talked about 14 siblings of a parent. I think that was Julia. Talk about how you may or may not have tracked down what's going on with 14 siblings, your uncles and aunts, with this disease.
Yes. So, excuse me. With the 14, it's approximately a 50-50 ratio of people who have it. Although I will say, and this is important for this, you know, one of the goals for today's session is encouraging people to get tested. We have that ability now. And so there are people in the family that we still don't know if they have the gene or not. Unfortunately, some of the siblings have passed away now from, you know, kidney failure. And we're now at the stage where the next generation, you know, is some are getting tested, others aren't. Some of the first generation is not getting tested because they're kind of like, well, you know, I'm already 70 years old. I don't have any issues with my kidneys, so I probably don't have the gene. So there's a lot of questions, actually, you know, how late can the expression go? I mean, there's some people, there's a lot of variability in the expression of when the kidney starts to fail. Some people very early, others much later. My mom's symptoms, you know, she didn't go on to dialysis until she was approximately well, just 3 years ago. So that's, you know, 75 years old. So you know, just even within our own family, there's a lot of work to be done in order to have, you know, information is power, and people need to know if they have this gene in order to be prepared and to be able to you know, maybe get a transplant if necessary. Unfortunately for some of my family members, it was too late.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you to both Angela and Julia. Really appreciate your candid remarks, very personal remarks. We're going to move to how we can deal with managing our MUC1 and our UMOD, also called ADTKD. We've got a session now on management, and best to present that is our partner and good friend, Dr. Anthony Blyer. Tony leads the rare inherited kidney disease research team at Wake Forest. I think most of us, if not all of us as patients, know the kind of care and interest and effectiveness that Dr. Blyer has taken over the last 30 years in his career. He's a clinical researcher who has helped identify mutations in UMOD, MUC1, REN, and APOA4 as causes of inherited kidney disease. On a personal note, 8 years ago, I remember having 21 of my own family, of the next generation, the cousins that I've mentioned, that have a 50% chance of getting this, including 5 of my own children, and parents on this call. Looked up at the end of the call, and it was 11:30 Eastern time, where Tony was. You want to talk about personal interest in patients, it's all about Tony Blyer. Let's turn it over to Tony. Give us some advice on managing our disease.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, Richard. So I know that so many people out there suffer with this condition, and you're looking at your families and how your families are doing with it. And so we're working every day. You may not hear from us every day, but we are working with you. Can you guys see my screen okay?
You bet.
All right, good. All right, so yeah, so and I know my heart goes out to you, and we're really working to try to find a treatment for this disease. Really excited that Dr. Greca is really leading the way with this, and with he's just so inspiring. And so I'm going to talk today about living with ADTKD. I would like to say something about our last speaker, which was interesting, and how she mentioned that some family members start on dialysis at a much younger age than others, or I could say some start at a much older age, right? And so we're really interested in family members who are mildly affected and severely affected. So sometimes people might be like, well, they may only want the people who have like more severe disease, but actually we're really interested in characterizing the disease in people who are mildly affected, because we want to learn from those people. What can we learn from their genome and from their urine and blood? So every family member, every patient is a data point. And these data points all together help us to characterize the disease. So I'd like to thank you all, first of all, for your participation in our studies. And I know I'm a little biased in this, but I think that, the number one thing that we can all do to get to a treatment is to work together in these studies. Of course, the information, we think you should speak to your doctor for more specialized information And so we're just providing general thoughts on this. And so just a brief review, we know that the CKD stages greater than 90 means you really have great kidney function. We usually say GFR greater than 60. When you get your report, it'll say eGFR greater than 60, because the equations are not that good that we can make specific calculations. Then we get to CKD3 with a GFR between 30 to less than 60, and we can begin having symptoms of fatigue. When the GFR gets to between 15 to less than 30, we have more fatigue. And I can tell there's anxiety because we're now thinking about kidney transplant and what's going to happen. And then everyone in the US should be referred for transplant evaluation at GFR as soon as it goes below 20, even if it's one time. And then you can get on the waiting list. Now, it'll still be several years in general before you would need a transplant or renal replacement therapy, but you can accrue time. And so even if your doctor is like, well, I don't know if we need to do this yet, make sure, get on the list when your GFR falls less than 20, and they can put you on the list inactive. So that means you don't have to get a transplant right away, but you can accrue time. You can start dialysis when the GFR is less than 15, but recent studies suggest that there's not a real benefit for most patients until the GFR is less than 10. Just to talk a little bit, what a funny name, autosomal dominant tubulointerstitial kidney disease. And we actually came up with this at a nice meeting in Boston about 15 years or 10 or 15 years ago. And the name of the disease is really to help doctors to identify the disease. Tubulointerstitial, so there are the glomeruli, the filtering units of the kidney that you see right there. And they filter and they keep the protein and blood out of the urine. A lot of kidney disease are glomerular, right? And blood and protein goes in the urine, but our disease occurs in the tubules right here. So we don't have blood or protein in the urine. It's for most patients, it's after the glomerulus. And so that confuses doctors, but that's why it's called tubulointerstitial. What's in a name? How do you communicate to your doctor about the disease? The names of this disease have changed over time. I don't even like to mention the old names because I don't want to bring them up. But the thing that you really need to know is a gene name for your particular condition. And for everybody on this call, it's either UMOD or MUC1. And if you don't know if you have UMOD or MUC1, just email us if you're part of our study, or even if you're not, and we can help you to figure that out. So that's the thing you want to know. I visited Prague with to visit Dr. Kamach, and we went to this wonderful, beautiful library, and it made me think that the gene name is like a library card. Okay, it's like a library card. So if you have MUC1, your doctor can go to the library and look up MUC1. This is supposed to say UMOD, of course. But any of these diseases, you can look them up. And so then your doctor can look them up, and that exposes them to the whole library about the disease. So knowing those four, letters and numbers, so MUC1 or UMOD is key. And then, of course, if the doctor can't find the books, what do you do if you can't find the book? Ask the librarian. So we're always happy to help our colleagues out if they have questions about the disease, as many of you know. And this is Dr. Kamach, of course, with me here in this wonderful library. I like this one better. You belong to the ADTKD club, and you either have UMOD or MUC1. And so it's just important to know that. Now, quickly on the disease, MUC1 is a membrane-anchored mucoprotein. So it's on the surface of many cells, and most of our patients, almost all, have an extra C after 7 Cs, extra cytosine after 7 cytosines. This causes what's called the frame shift mutation. So it's like adding an extra letter and moving everything over one. So I took the dog on a walk and picked up some ice cream, if I added an extra H here, you can see that we get a totally different message. The mutated MUC1 protein resides inside the tubule cell, and Dr. Greca has done a bunch of awesome work looking at this. MUC1 genetic testing is not commercially available in the US. This is being worked on, but it's not available right now. So all US MUC1 testing comes through Wake Forest, and then we collect the samples in a plate, and we send them to Dr. Greca's team at the Broad Institute. And so then we get the results back and call back. It takes 6 to 12 weeks, and all testing is free, and it's a clinical test. UMOD is a protein that's only made in the thick ascending limb. This is what we call this part of the tubule. It's a protein with the highest cysteine content in the body. And this disease, so the MUC1, it's like everybody has the extra cytosine. This disease is different. There are many different mutations that can cause this, and these different colors show different mutations that we've had. And so if you have a mutation in UMOD, we can help to determine the age of end-stage kidney disease to some degree based on the type of mutation. And the UMOD variant causes a change in an amino acid usually. And so it's like if you have a Lego block and instead of a round knob, you have a square knob, and then you can't build your Lego set. And in the same way, the mutated UMOD, very similar to the mutated MUC1, deposits in the thick ascending limb or deposits in the tubule cells of the kidney. UMOD genetic testing is currently clinically available throughout the United States, and it's very easily obtainable. And so if someone in your family wants to get tested, you can actually get directed mutational analysis. What does that mean? So that means if we know what your mutation is, you can get your testing through a company, and then that company like GeneDx or Natera, and then it's usually covered by insurance. It's not very expensive, and it'll give you a clinical test result. So what is our latest news from Wake Forest? What's the latest? We are currently recruiting for our FDA-approved Optimum study. That's 200 participants that we're going to follow over 3 to 4 years. Now, if we recruit these patients over 3 years, we won't collect that much data. So we're really trying to recruit all these patients in the first year, so that way we can have data that we collect for 3 years. I have a great team, as many of you guys know. We have Abby and Lauren and Kendra, and now we have Stephanie and Shariana. And so they're all excellent. And so if you can help us get you and family members into the study early on, that helps us in several ways. So one way it helps us is that it helps us to reach our goal, and then we can work on other things in the study. And the second thing is then we're able to follow patients for a longer period of time and get more data. So the great thing about this study is the FDA, we have funding, and we're going to have statisticians, an army of statisticians looking at the data. Many of you have given us your old serum creatinine values a long time ago, and we have them in our database. We have thousands of these values now. And so these guys are going to crunch the numbers for us, and we're going to learn a lot about the disease. We're super excited. Then we're doing special ultrasounds on 50 participants. And so we're going to look at stiffness of the kidney and see how this correlates. We're trying to get the one problem with this test is it has to be done at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem. If any of you can make it down, we'd love to meet with you. I'd love to meet with you personally, and we can get the ultrasound. And a number of patients have already done this, and it's really worked out well. We're hoping to have a weekend which we're organizing so that maybe some patients who are farther away could come for that together with a conference. And then the other part of our study, we will be getting labs locally every 3 months, and that's free. We are also creating a library of kidney biopsies that have been performed on non-transplant patients. And so what is that? So a lot of patients have had kidney biopsies in the past, not transplant, the regular biopsy. And we're trying to collect all of those, put them, scan them onto the computer, de-identified, no one's name. And so that way pathologists can look at these, and we want to look at these biopsies all together and try to understand the disease better. Because in the future, we may do if we do a drug study, we may do a biopsy before and after. And so we'd like to have these biopsies. We'd like to learn about these biopsies as much as we can right now. If anyone is having a kidney or partial kidney removed for cyst or cancer, it would be great to let us know beforehand, and we would be interested in obtaining a piece of this tissue. We can then work with teams like worked with Dr. Greca and grow these cells, and then we can test them against medicine. So if any of you were ever to have this done for medical purposes, please let us know. At present, I am interested in looking at FDA-approved medications and their effects. So we're waiting for medicines to become available specifically targeted for ADTKD. But while we're waiting, I would like to see if any FDA-approved medicines are beneficial. I'll give you an example. Losartan. Losartan is an angiotensin receptor blocker. It's something that a lot of our patients are on. It's been shown to be effective in a number of kidney diseases. So we're interested in looking at this more systematically, and we're thinking about how we can do this. As we've discussed before, we don't have a really good biomarker of kidney disease, and so we're going to be working on these biomarkers still. And if we had a biomarker of disease activity, that would really help us. And it's something that we're really interested in and have worked on for a long time. So I asked Abby, Lauren, Shariana, and Stephanie, what are the questions you guys are getting? And so here they are. Everybody is concerned, like me, about what's going on in the U.S. federal government. Is this affecting our work or funding? So our longitudinal study is funded by the FDA for 3 years. This does not appear to be affected so far. We haven't heard anything. Everything seems to be going. The funding was already set up previously. So we're continuing it, and we anticipate to be able to continue this. We do not receive funding from the NIH, so that's not an issue. We have some private foundation support that keeps our work going, and this is unaffected. While many things are going on in the U.S. government, everything is stable so far for us. So we have our consent form, and there are questions. A lot of people ask about this part of the consent form if you get in our study. And it says some of the people, agencies, and businesses that may receive and use your health information are the investigators at other sites who are assisting with the research. Central labs, reading centers, analysis centers, IRB, representatives of Wake Forest, representatives from government agencies such as the FDA, Department of Health and Human Services, and similar agencies. So people are like, wow, so you're sending my information to the FDA or to the government? The answer is no, we are not sending that. What happens for all the, we work at a research institution. And so this research has to be, overseen, right? Because we want to make sure in general that researchers are doing what they're supposed to be doing and that they're not guilty of scientific misconduct, right? So because we're part of a research institution, we have some funding for the FDA, we could be audited by different, departments. We've never been audited. It would be highly unlikely for us to be audited. Usually that's for a drug study or a study that's failing, I guess. I don't know, but we've never had an issue with this. But this is standard, what we call boilerplate language that is in all of the consents at Wake Forest. And so, but basically what it's saying is that if someone were to come in and audit, they could look at our data. All our data is housed very separately on a server, and I would never give it to anyone, and especially not the we would not give the identified material. We do share de-identified material with our colleagues in Prague and at the Broad Institute. And so I went over this. Patient confidentiality. So our data is stored on a secure network on the REDCap database. We are extensively HIPAA compliant. So the patient data is stored in a secured locked part of this database. We never share any information about particular patients, like names, dates of birth, any of that stuff with anyone. We don't, other collaborators, nothing like that. Everyone we work with is averse to receiving patient health information. Say, for example, we, by accident, were to send patient health information to the Broad Institute or to any of these places we work with. They would then have to report that up their chain of command. This would be a huge investigation. So no one really cares about you as an individual. I mean, we care about you, but not your information. And so we have very safeguarded ways that we don't send that data. We always work to maintain the privacy of the data. Our information is never shared with national databases or with the government or your clinics or anything like that. Now, the way it gets shared is if we give you results and you go and you tell your doctor, you say, hey, we were tested for the MUC1 gene and I was found to have that. And you tell your doctor that now becomes part of your chart, your medical chart. But we don't give that, but you have to think if you give it to your doctor. One thing we were super interested in are glucose uptake inhibitors. You've heard all the commercials about this, Jardiance, Farxiga. They're extremely useful medicines. They're great for diabetic kidney disease and most forms of kidney disease. What do? They block uptake of glucose from the tubule. So remember, we have this filtering unit, and one of the things that's filtered is glucose. And then we reabsorb this glucose. You can imagine when it was difficult to find food or there was the decrease in calories, that it would be really important evolutionarily that we could reabsorb any glucose. But this takes energy to do this. And so what the SGLT2 inhibitors do is they block this uptake of glucose. This puts more glucose into the urine. And so anyone who's been on these medicines, they will have a lot of glucose in their urine. It helps to lose weight a little. And also we believe the decreased use of energy is good for the kidney. This results in a small increase in the serum creatinine that is reversible. So it's like if you rent a Ryder pickup truck or any type of rental car or rental truck, you can only go 65 miles an hour. In the US, there's a regulator on that. Now, if you got up to 65 and you tried to go 70, you'd be like, man, there's something wrong with this car or truck. But if I took that regulator off, you'd be able to go up. Now, let's just pretend that what that does is preserves the life of the engine. So in a similar way, that's what these glucose uptake inhibitors and also drugs like losartan and ACE inhibitors are doing, is they're lowering the filtration of the kidney, but they're not affecting the kidney function, though they make the creatinine go up. So here's the big study in chronic kidney disease, and you can see here was the dapagliflozin. And so you could see people who were on the placebo, over time, their GFR went down. So this was a baseline and it went down. And over 36 months, it went down about 3 to 4 ml per minute. Now, as we talked about, these patients on dapagliflozin decreased filtration of the kidney. Almost immediately, we see this drop in kidney function. If we had stopped the medicine, it would have gone right back up. But we continue it, we're taking pressure off the kidney, and we can see this slower rate of decline. Look how many patients they started with, 2,000. Look how long they followed them, 3 years. We don't have 2,000 patients in this much data to follow. So we think these drugs, we've shown them to be, or doctors have shown them to be beneficial in patients with increased urinary protein. And there is an initial reversible fall in the GFR. Patients also become mildly dehydrated on these medicines. And that's a little bit problematic because, like, if you go get your labs and you, I don't know, the night before you went for a run, if you're athletic or something, or it was a really hot day and you went to the beach, then your creatinine tends to be high and we have to repeat the lab. So we're always struggling with that. A marker that these drugs work is they make the hemoglobin go up. And that's been shown to be a very effective marker, a very good marker of their effectiveness. So we looked at patients who were on these medicines. We had 22 patients from the US, 5 patients from Ireland. Of the 27 patients, 2 stopped at 1 month, an additional 4 stopped at less than 3 months, an additional 6 stopped prior to 1 year. Why did they all stop? Because we're very creatinine centric. None of the patients had side effects, but they saw the creatinine go up and it was nerve-wracking. So if you go on these drugs, you just have to like kind of just not worry about the creatinine. And so you can see that, and I understand why patients stop these medicines. No patients developed any urinary tract infections or fungal infections. So we think they are well tolerated in ADTKD. However, hemoglobin levels did not change after 3 months. Remember, that was a marker that the drug works. And our patients, the hemoglobin did not go up. And we did not see a change in the slope of kidney function, though we only had, like 20 patients. They had 2,000 in their study. We only had 20. But the rate of GFR loss was minus 2.6 before. And so losing 2.6 ml per minute per year. Controls that we had a loss of 2.2, and before it was minus 3.13. So none of this was statistically significant.
Dr. Blair, we would love to keep going. We've got several questions. Maybe we could squeeze in here at the end of the time.
Okay, do you want me to stop?
Okay, Kathy, go ahead with questions.
Are you want me to stop the presentation, Richard? Is that it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right.
Questions.
Okay, so we have a question from David. Do you know, Dr. Blyer, if there's any research being done on ADTKD in Canada?
I would say we work very closely with the Canadian nephrologists, and they refer a lot of their patients to us. But we're trying to expand into Canada to do some stuff, but no, there's nothing specific. That we have great collaborators in Canada. Dr. Dervila Kanal is awesome. And so we would be happy to work with you guys, and we're trying to expand into Canada.
Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Can Fabhalta help with UMOD?
Excuse me?
Can the drug Fabhalta, I don't know if I'm saying it right, help with UMOD?
How is that spelled?
Fabhalta.
If you could send me that, I'll have to look it up.
Okay, we'll send it to you. And the next question, is there any evidence that MUC1 may cause or contribute to other diseases? For example, non-ischemic cardiomyopathy?
No. Now, what happens with MUC1 is there's chronic kidney failure develops. And with chronic kidney failure, there are a lot of pathophysiologic changes that occur just from chronic kidney disease. So, for example, with the MUC1 disease, you could get gout. You could get, with the UMOD, gout is intrinsic related to the UMOD mutation. But for the MUC1, you get gout like other patients with chronic kidney disease. You get anemia later in life like other patients with chronic kidney disease. Everything that, most of the stuff except the high risk of COVID is associated with the chronic kidney disease.
Thank you. Are you using AI? Oh, sorry, we have 2 more questions, Rich. Are you using AI to help with the data collection and research?
Yes. We're interested in looking at that with the kidney biopsies and also with our analysis of the data.
And the last question is, are there different symptoms for those with UMOD versus those with MUC1?
So UMOD patients tend to get gout early in life. And gout occurs before the development of chronic kidney disease. Patients with MUC1 are at increased risk of COVID-19. There's a new medicine, a monoclonal, that's available for treating that. If you're interested, we could do a webinar at Wake Forest for that. Anyone who has questions, please just send me an email and we can talk about that.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
thank you
you
guys.
very, very much, Tony. Super job. Greatly appreciate your 3 decades of looking after us as
Thank you.
patients and hopefully another couple of decades to go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's see if we can stay on schedule here. Paul Conway is going to take our next session. Go ahead, Paul.
Great. Thank you very much, Rich. And for our next session, we have the distinct honor of having Dr. Anna Greca. And as Richard has mentioned, Anna is associated with MIT and Harvard Brigham. She's been a pioneer on behalf of those with rare disease. We've had an opportunity to have her at a number of different international formats, and she's compelling. And let me tell you what the distinctive is, Dr. Greca, from a patient standpoint. You want researchers and doctors who understand what the burdens of disease are in a practical way, and they take those experiences they've heard from patients and it fuels their work and their curiosity. And Dr. Greca, hats off to you because you've never lost the sense of the patients in any of your work. So why don't we go ahead and turn the floor over to you. We're always excited to hear from you, and especially the important work you're doing and how we can support you. So go right ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul and Richard and Sharon and everyone at the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. Some of you may have heard me speak yesterday as well, and so some of this may be repetition, but I actually was wondering about maybe making this more interactive. If there's questions that people want answers to, I can try to do my best to answer them. I can also briefly go over the points that I described yesterday so that everybody is on the same page. I just wanted to say that, you know, it's a distinct and special honor for me to be with all of you today. And I think it's just remarkable, like the heartiest congratulations, because the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation has come so far. I mean, this is such an incredibly well-organized virtual summit. Kudos to everyone who's worked to make this possible. I just think that, you know, this organization started out with me basically saying to Richard and a small number of patients that, you know, you have to get organized, you know, your advocacy is going to be important as we develop treatments and try to move them toward the clinic. And of course, Paul and Richard know this very well, how important advocacy is. And so, you know, kudos, like really, you have done such an incredible job organizing, and I know that there's more to do, but this is just a tremendous effort, and it will really pay off in the future because this kind of advocacy is very effective. Organizations like the FDA and the EMA in Europe, the European Medicines Association, loves to hear from patients, and it's most impactful if you tell your stories. Of course, we as the physicians and the scientists, you know, try to make the best case possible for whatever treatments you know, we're trying to push forward toward the clinic. But really, the patient voice is very, very important. And it's absolutely critical in the process of developing those drugs. That's why I wish for all of you to be our partners on this long and winding road, admittedly, until we can get to therapies. But we are, you know, well on our way and very committed to making all of this happen. So again, I'm just honored and incredibly grateful and proud, if I can say, for the fact that you as patients have organized so wonderfully to, you know, to advocate for these diseases. So it makes everything so much better. So I guess I will go through a few short slides like I did yesterday, but I really just want to open it up for questions as well. I do want to address one question that was just in the chat about iptacopan or Fabhalta. This is the new medicine made by Novartis, as it would be. but it is not for these diseases, and it's not expected to help with these diseases. It's approved for C3 glomerulonephritis and for IgA nephropathy, as well as in children with paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, which I know is a mouthful, but these are rare diseases that are caused by dysregulation of the complement pathway, which unfortunately is not related to what we're dealing with here. And so I wouldn't expect this medicine to be effective for these diseases. I know someone was asking this question, and I know that Tony is also going to answer many of your other questions. And I want to also, as Tony mentioned, also iterate, I'm a nephrologist, an adult nephrologist, as well as an investigator. I spend almost all of my time doing research, but I would be happy to help you answer any questions or direct you to some of our clinical colleagues who can help you. The foremost clinician for these diseases in the United States is, of course, Tony Blyer and John Sayer in the UK, and I think he's also here today. So these are great resources, these physicians, colleagues of mine and friends. But, you know, I'm also happy to pitch in and help in any way I can, both for the science as well as for any questions about clinical matters that I can help with. Okay, so let me just, Paul, is it okay? Should I show some slides first to frame the conversation, or would you like to
Sure,
jump into questions? You're the chair.
That's what I would
so
do.
it's up to you.
Well, I think if you can go ahead and walk through some slides, and then we can make it very conversational afterwards. I've collected some
Awesome.
questions also from folks, and
Awesome.
I think you'll find yourself on the hot seat. No.
Okay,
Just
no,
kidding.
no problem. I'm happy to do what I can. So okay, so here's just a few slides to frame, you know, who we are and what we do at the Broad Institute. And we are, of course, very focused on the kind of research that will ultimately lead to therapies. These are my disclosures. It's really important for me to disclose specifically that I have been working on, you know, we've licensed basically some of our discoveries out of the Broad Institute into a new biotech company. Richard calls this an affiliate of the Broad. It's not actually an affiliate, it's an independent VC-funded entity, and my only relationship to them is to be an advisor to the company. But of course, I care deeply about what they do in terms of, you know, progressing toward the clinic. So it was funded by several VC funds, and it remained in stealth mode, and it is now partnered with Alexion and AstraZeneca. So it's important for me to disclose this, and it's very much a journey that is still ongoing. And hopefully will result in a treatment that can make its way to the clinic. So my team, again, I'm a physician scientist with an emphasis on the scientist part. That's where I devote most of my time. There's a great need for us to make sense of, you know, how do we take this great plethora of disease genes, so many disease genes that we have uncovered, and you know, how can we make sense of how these misspellings in the DNA, if you will, what do they do inside our cells? You know, how do they cause, you know, circuits to break inside our cells that ultimately lead to disease? This is the specific area that my lab specializes in. And of course, we try to use then these discoveries about cellular mechanisms to try to build specific therapies or candidate therapies for the clinic. This is a very common trajectory for many scientists. My colleague earlier, who also shared her her mother's story with MUC1 kidney disease, sounds like she's doing very much the same kind of work. And this is really important work so that we can understand how we go from genetics, from deciphering the misspellings in the DNA, to ultimately developing therapies. And it's a very big field of inquiry across many different disease areas. And so this is exactly what my lab at the Broad Institute is focused on. And just to give you a sense of what we have done and where we hope to go, we are, if you will, bullish on the idea that we can get a therapy to the clinic because we have done it before. So earlier on, and this is work that is not related to MUC1 and UMOD, but earlier on in my lab, we worked on another set of mutations that activate or inactivate certain pathways in another part of the kidney, the filtering part of the kidney. And we focused on this target, this ion channel, and we built specific drugs or medicines that specifically work on this ion channel. And we were able to take this from discovery in my lab back in 2013, 2017, all the way to phase 2 clinical trials in patients in 2021-22. And so this work has been completed, and this project is now with Bristol Myers Squibb, hoping to make it all the way. We're very hopeful for this, and the reason to believe that we can do this again is because we've done it before. So this is what I wanted to mention, that, you know, our group has been successful in the past to bring it all the way to patients in phase 2 clinical trials in patients. By the way, those patients responded beautifully to this drug. And so, again, we're very hopeful that we can do it again. And so today we will be focusing on MUC1 and UMOD, which my lab has been working on. And of course, we're hoping that we can enter phase 1 in 2027. So we're farther behind, but making our way. And I just hope that I can convey to you that while this is a winding path, there is a way to get there, and it's been done before, and we hope to get there again. So, you know, I'm trying to bring hope while also making, you know, keeping it, you know, realistic from the perspective that, you know, it's definitely not a straightforward path. Okay, and just to briefly mention, I mentioned it yesterday, and the details don't matter, but where you see green, that is bad, that is the mutant MUC1 that is accumulating. These are human cells from a patient who has generously donated a piece of their kidney so we could develop cells. What Dr. Blyer just mentioned is a very valuable tool for us, like truly, truly enormously valuable. This is a mouse that has the same mutation as the patient's. And as you can see, there's a lot of green mutant protein in the kidney of this mouse. Well, this is the kidney of a mouse, I should say, a slice of a kidney of this mouse. And this is a human organoid, a mini kidney in a dish, if you will, that we developed in the lab. Again, patients generously donated some of their blood. We took blood cells and turned them into pluripotent stem cells. And from there, we developed organoids, meaning mini kidneys in a dish. And from there, we were able to test the organoids that have the mutation from patients that have the mutation. They developed a whole bunch of green, bad mutant protein, if you will, right? And now this shows you what the drug is doing. You can see that the green is very effectively going away from all of these different scenarios, telling us that we have a start for a therapy. This is not a therapy itself. This is just a tool that we are going to use to develop a real drug. And so that's what we're doing right now. But to give you hope that this is what's happening, and it's not just in mice, as is shown in the center panel, but it's also in patient cells and in mini human kidneys, if you will. So we're very hopeful that this will work in humans as well once we get to this. And you know, the terminology doesn't matter too much, but if you want to know, this drug targets a specific mechanism that we discovered in our lab, and it's called TMED cargo receptors, and this is what we're working on. Think of them as cargo trucks that accumulate the mutant protein, the toxic protein, and they don't let it go. And in the presence of the drug, we can send the cargo trucks into the recycling facility of the cell called the lysosome, and that's how we're able to get rid of the mutant protein. So that's the general principle of how this drug works. And it also works in UMOD, and this is just showing you, yesterday there was a whole presentation about UMOD by one of the wonderful people in my group, Silvana Bazua Valenti, who worked on this project. But just to give you a little snippet to show that the mutant protein is here. These are the black lines that represent mutant protein in the mice that have this mutation, like the human mutation. And here's after the drug, the same, the siblings of these mice that have the mutation. There's a lot of reduction of the mutant protein in the presence of the drug, again, suggesting that working through these TMED cargo receptors, we're able to get the mutant protein to go away. So it works for UMOD and it works for MUC1, and it's a tool that we can now use as a starting point to build a suitable drug that can go into patients. And then the most interesting thing that we discovered, which I realize may not be of immediate interest to you, but it should be, and I will explain why, is that this mechanism that we uncovered in the kidney is not only operative in the kidney. It also affects patients who have families in which they have familial Alzheimer's disease. That means Alzheimer's runs in the family, so that people at my age would already have Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And so we can help those patients. It helps patients who have familial blindness. That means in every generation, half of the people in the family go blind. from a mutation, another misspelling in the DNA. And so we can help those patients as well. And on, we are finding now that it may have an involvement in some diseases that run in families that affect the liver, the lung, and other organs. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because this is an opportunity, this nodal biological mechanism is an opportunity for this disease to become much more desirable by pharmaceutical companies to develop, because it is actually likely to help many more patients. From their perspective, they're happy because they can sell their drug to more patients. Of course, they are in the business of making treatments for patients. From my perspective, it is very meaningful because we can have an easier path to approval potentially, and also because I can help more patients, which is of course my mandate. I'm a physician scientist. This is what I trained for. And so the opportunity to help more people is both strategically helpful to your community, it is helpful to other patient communities, and of course it's helpful to everyone involved in the drug development process, because we can simply help more people. So I wanted you to know that this is also something that we're interested in. And so this nodal biological mechanism is basically how we uncovered how we go from a misspelling in these genes to these TMED cargo receptors, and how we can harness this understanding to build a treatment that will hopefully make its way to the clinic. And so the current status for the treatment, as I mentioned yesterday, we started out from the tool that I mentioned to you earlier. We built another molecule that we thought was good for the clinic. Last minute, there was some toxicity to that molecule that was not related to these TMEDs, but it was related to what we call off-target toxicity, meaning something else was affected by that small molecule. It was sneaking into something else and causing trouble. So we could not move that forward to the clinic. So now we're back to the drawing board and pushing a new possible candidate drug toward the clinic. And we'll see where that takes us. We're still sort of in the process of doing that. And so that's why we were initially planning to do clinical trials kind of now. And now it's been pushed by a couple of years because of this unfortunate complication, which is, however, extremely common in drug development. I wish it hadn't happened, but it did. We know how to get over it, but it is one of those like twists and turns on the road of developing a treatment that is not uncommon. And the final thought that I want to leave you with is actually that we are not sitting on our hands just because we have this, approach with the TMED cargo receptors, which would essentially be a pill. This is the first effort to get there. But drug development or developing treatments for diseases is like climbing a tall mountain. So we are not just taking one path. This is the one path that is still on its way. But if our goal is to prevent, cure, or completely manage all of these diseases for all of you, then we have to take alternative paths as well. We don't know which way will get us to the peak. Maybe all of them will, if we're lucky. So in the meantime, my group is also working on what we call next generation treatments, and this is ongoing work. So this is now inspired by the work that we did previously, but now we are working on things like, for anyone who understands or is interested in this, nucleic acid therapies, things like antisense oligonucleotides and siRNAs. These have never really been developed successfully for the kidney so far, but there are some ongoing efforts, and we're very encouraged, actually, that we're making our way here. So we are working on this. And then, of course, the big aspirational goal would be that we do a one and done cure. Go into the kidney and fix the misspelling forever, so that no one has to worry about, transplant or dialysis or taking pills every day. That would be a cure. We are very far from that. That is the gene therapy approach that we're working on. We're very far from that. I just want you to hear me. We are working on it, but it's a long road. So this is not something that will come around the corner, but it might be suitable for the next generation. And I know that many of you, of course, deeply care about the next generation. I'm a parent too, so I totally understand. And so we are working on that, and we hope to be able to bring something forward. It might take us a decade of work on this, but we're determined, and we're going to try our best to make a gene therapy possible as well. And so I just want to skip through the next few slides and come to the most important slide, which is, it takes truly a small village to make all of this work happen. So this is my team. And we all work very well together. I am, honored and lucky, frankly, to have such a talented team of scientists who are so very dedicated to the cause. and of course, an incredible team of collaborators, many of whom are on this call and you've heard from already, who all of us together are working in service of, finding therapies for these diseases. So I'll stop there, and I hope that we can have a conversation, have some questions, answers, and do the best I can to answer them.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. And one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is what we've seen over the past couple of years is FDA has changed in the area of diagnostic drug and device approval, where they're actually telling companies that are coming into FDA with trials and with drugs, looking at the product pipeline years in advance, that they are specifically looking for collaborations with patients and the company's use of patient insight data and lived experience data. And I was wondering if you could tell the audience how important that is from your aspect, looking long range in getting ready to go to FDA.
Critical, of course, Paul, as you well know, and I think, as has been true for several other therapies that have been approved for kidney, and of course for many other indications as well. What we call patient-reported outcomes is one way to say this, or just as you say, the lived experience of the patient. What do patients care about? What are the symptoms that you want to address? I think these are all critical to all the regulatory agencies in the US as well as in Europe. And I think that this becomes a really important part of the approval process. So this is why, again, what I said in my sort of opening remarks, that, when Richard and I were first talking about starting a foundation, I said, this is an effort that has to come not from me. I mean, I'm happy to help and be a part and a partner in the process as we are doing today, but that the patients have to be organized and, be ready in terms of partnering with, whichever entity, pharmaceutical company, startup company, whoever it is that brings a therapy forward to the FDA. The patient groups are critically important. And, participating in natural history studies, for example, that our colleague, Dr. Blyer, is conducting is critically important, what we call the registry. So the registry is one way to be counted. Then further, participating in a natural history study involves sharing a little bit more of your data than just the fact that you are part of the registry. And those are all very, very important steps that we have to take to prepare for clinical trials. So clinical trial readiness through the patient organization, and then partnership, as you say, all the way to approval. And the agency absolutely loves to hear from patients. And in fact, as you also said, if they don't hear, there's something wrong, right? Like they feel like maybe this is not the right path, and that's not what the patients care about most. And so for any entity, a company, pharma company, startup company that goes to the FDA, patient engagement is absolutely critical. Patients as partners every step of the way. I think it's really important.
Okay, and then we'll get to Kathy has some questions from the audience, but I want to ask you one other thing so that folks listening understand how strategic this is. One of the other things that FDA will ask, and I say this as somebody who just got done 6 years of chairing the FDA's Patient Engagement Advisory Committee, they will often ask, what is the role of patients been in informed consent for clinical trials, and also what has been the level of engagement for return of results? And I'm wondering if you could kind of speculate on that or talk about that, because I know a lot of folks, before they even get to the point of saying yes on a trial, they want to know what is involved, who was involved with consent, and that type of thing.
Absolutely. And I think that those are all, again, this critical aspect of patients as partners at every step. As you also earlier said, like nothing should be happening for patients without the patients, right? That, it's critically important that, even when we're drafting a consent form, even when we are designing a clinical trial and we're saying, oh, we're going to, do this procedure on this date, and then 2 months later, we're going to do that, and then 3 months later, and then, patient input is really critical. Like they might say, oh, that's terribly inconvenient, or I don't think any of my fellow patients are going to sign up for that, but if you do it this way, then it would be more convenient and people would sign up. For example, just, this is not relevant to this disease, but for prior trials that I have been involved with our previous discoveries, it used to be thought that you need to do a 24-hour collection of urine. Well, for most of us who work and have an active life, like imagine, like how do you collect your urine for 24 hours? You have to stay home, right? And kind of run to the bathroom every time, you need to collect your urine. very impractical. And then it became apparent that you don't actually need to do that, that you just need to do, 2 or 3 early morning, collections that is just as good as the 24 hours. A lot of that input came from patients. And of course, if you stop to think about it, of course, it's terribly inconvenient and impractical, right? And so I'm just giving an example to say that patient input at every step is really, really important. And everybody looks for that. And I think, our colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry are very attuned to this as well. Of course, us, the academic investigators, are very attuned to this. And, partnering with patient organizations like the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation is going to be critical as we design our trials, figure out what endpoints we're going to use, the language in the informed consent, all these things, who gets to conduct the trials, are they going to be, in XYZ center in the United States? Are we covering enough ground? What about patients who live in more rural areas? All these things have to be taken into account. Are there ways in which we can be more adaptable, like send a nurse to the house instead of having the patient travel, I don't know, 100 miles to go to a center, right? So, and these days, I mean, we have computers, we have technology, it should be possible to utilize these tools. And I think, everybody's very interested in doing that. And I think for this audience, it's very important that we all hear that this is a patient-centric approach to clinical trials is the way to go.
Hats off to you, Doc. I know that Kathy has a couple of questions that she's gotten from the audience. Kathy, go ahead.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Greca. This is a two-part question. What are the chances that stem cells could be used to replace damaged tubule cells? And the second part is your lab doing any research in this area?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, stem cells and cell replacement therapies have been attractive for a long time. And yet they haven't been as successful as one would think for a lot of diseases. So we are not currently working in cell replacement therapies for the kidney. There have been some efforts that have not been terribly successful. Part of the reason is because in the case of both MUC1 and UMOD, there are very specific kinds of kidney cells that are affected by the mutation and that unfortunately die off over time. And it is very hard to specifically replace those particular cells. And so I think, in the large context of what one would have to do, it's potentially harder than developing a gene therapy, which I already told you is like a very, very hard problem. So this is my scientific perspective on this, that I don't think that it's going to be as promising an approach as the other approaches that I just described earlier. So pills, nucleic acid therapies like ASOs and siRNAs, and then various gene therapies and gene editors that we're working on. So that's why we have not prioritized this area of work. But there are some efforts, and of course, I'm a scientist, so one should always leave room open for new things. And so it's possible that one day we will figure out exactly how to replace those very particular cells that we are missing. But at the present time, I'm not sure that we're very clever about doing that. So that's my best answer to that question.
Thank you. The next question is also two parts. Can MUC1 be traced back to a single population, or has the mutation occurred across multiple ancestors? And do we know how rare the first occurrence in the family is for these mutations?
Wow, yeah, that's an interesting question. And there's others here who, Greg, for example, from Cyprus has tackled this question and can tell you more about it as well. So others can chime in, but it's probably true that there were many independent initial mutations, because truly there's no geographic limitation to this mutation. We find it in people everywhere, on every continent, as far as I can tell. There are founder effects. For example, in Cyprus, it's pretty clear that there was probably an initial ancestor, and then there has been, the island effect of sort of people intermarrying within a smaller geographic location often, means that there was an initial mutation and a common haplotype for all of those patients. That means a common stretch of mutated or misspelled DNA that they all share from an initial ancestor. So the best answer is probably that there were several spontaneous mutations. I think another reason to think that is because this area of the MUC1, the reason the MUC1 was so hard to find, this mutation, is because the mutation, the misspelling in the DNA, is hiding in a very dark corner of the human genome, if you will. And that's why it was so hard to find it, and it took a lot of special firepower by the Broad Institute to really get to that mutation. So that dark corner of the human genome is prone to mutation, if you will. And so it's likely that this is the reason why all of the mutations in MUC1 concentrate in that dark little corner, as we call it. The VNTR is the technical term, the variable number of tandem repeats region. So it's just prone to mutations, and that's probably why these mutations arose. And there's some evidence, we discussed this yesterday, that there could also be somatic mutations, which means new mutations that arise in an individual patient, not that they inherited from their mom or dad. So that's also a possibility that we are looking at in some cases. But the vast majority are inherited in an autosomal dominant pattern, as you have been hearing. So every generation in every family is affected, and there are probably multiple ancestors. Did I answer everything? I'm trying to think. Was there?
I think you did. I think Kathy's got one last question for you.
One
Very
Doc?
good.
question we have time for. Will pig kidneys be used in the future for kidney transplants?
Oh, yes. Not so much in the future, even in the present. This is really exciting work. So to back up for those who may not be familiar, as you probably know, there's a shortage of organs. There's not enough kidneys to go around for all the patients who need a kidney transplant. And so some of my colleagues, actually, there's several colleagues all around the United States and the world who have been working on this problem. A lot of it is based on what we call CRISPR technology. So CRISPR is a way to basically use scissors or tweezers to change genes, to cut them and snip them and paste in the correct kind of gene that you need. Or sometimes just to cut them out completely and eliminate them if they're bad genes, let's say. So CRISPR technology has received the Nobel Prize. There were 2 discoveries that happened simultaneously. One was at the University of Berkeley. They received the Nobel Prize, and the Broad Institute, my institute, also we discovered how to use CRISPR in human cells. So CRISPR has enabled something really pioneering, which is that you can generate kidneys in a pig that can have all the bad pig genes taken out, and like appropriate preparation of that pig kidney without any bad genes from the pig. So those are all gone, and now there's a functional pig kidney that is about the size of a human kidney, which is about the size of my fist. And now that kidney that came from a pig but has been prepared for a human, if you will, using CRISPR technology, can now be transplanted in a human. And in fact, that's happened a few times now. A couple of times, patients lived for a period of time, but then unfortunately they passed on. But now there's a patient who has received a kidney transplant who's still doing quite well. And these people are pioneers, and we will see how it goes, but there's a lot of promise for this. And I think that this could be an approach that can help us manage the shortage of kidneys for transplant. Of course, if our efforts are successful, we will never need transplants or dialysis. So everybody, all the scientists are working in their own sort of track to try to see what we can do to help patients. But this is incredible new technology, and there could be a time when pig kidneys will be more widely available. Right now, it's highly experimental. It looks promising. There's a lot of hurdles still, as with every new therapy. But thank you for the question. I think it's a wonderful new technology on the horizon, for sure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greca. And at the end of the day, you're an optimist and you're a champion. And as I was saying at the top, and Rich knows this quite well, for everybody who's watching, understand it's often rare to find somebody who is a scientist, a doctor, and a passionate advocate all in one package. You're that package, and
Thank
this
you. You're very
foundation
kind.
and all of us as patients, we're very fortunate to have you in the arena alongside us.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Thank you.
fortunate to work with all of you. Thank you so much.
You bet. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and welcome Lisa Parcell, who's a fantastic and dynamic volunteer for RKDF. She's an ADTKD and UMOD patient. Throughout her time with the foundation, she's played a key role in raising awareness of ADTKD within medical and social media communities. And on the social media side, hats off to you. Spectacular work that she has done. Lisa will be moderating our next session, which is entitled Why Patient Registries Are Critical. So I'd like to go ahead and toss it over to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for the kind words. Welcome, everyone, to our session titled Why Patient Registries Are Critical. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kendra Kidd, Senior Research Associate with Wake Forest University Rare Inherited Kidney Disease Research Team. Since joining Dr. Blair's team back in 2012 to coordinate MUC1 genotyping with the Broad Institute, Kendra has established the International ADTKD Registry and Specimen Biobank, and she works with other ADTKD colleagues to further understanding of the disease progression in patients. Welcome, Kendra.
Good morning, and thank you, Lisa, for the introduction and for moderating the session. And thank you to RKDF for the opportunity today to present and talk about why patient registries are critical. My slides, Sharon, were you presenting my slides?
Yep, let me pull them up right now.
Great, thank you. Oh, you're fine. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. So again, I work here at Wake Forest University School of Medicine with Dr. Blyer as our principal investigator. And our team is wonderful here with Abby Taylor, Lauren Martin, Antonio Sanchez, Stephanie Cloud, and Shariana Vargas. And many of you also knew Vicki Robbins, who was our research nurse for 20 years, who retired back in June, and we greatly miss her. Okay, next slide, please. As the summit has been absolutely wonderful, and as we've talked about over the last 2 days, there are a lot of stakeholders in the rare disease space. We have patients that are looking for answers, clinicians helping them to manage their CKD and pursue genetic testing. We have the clinical research teams that coordinate human studies, science teams designing models to understand the disease process on cellular and model organism levels, and also identify therapeutic targets. And we also have patient foundations that come together that bridge this work with doctors and scientists for patient advocacy and to create a much needed community. And we also know that this is not as cyclical as this shows, but that we outreach to each other, and it's more of a community and a network of connections together to create and enhance our knowledge of the rare disease and be able to move together towards a treatment in the future. And I've been in the ADTKD community for a long time now, 13 years. And I think it's just a wonderful international network of these stakeholders working together. And my focus today is to talk about patient registries, and more specifically, the Wake Forest registry here and how that plays a role in the ADTKD rare disease network. Next slide, please. So today, when I'm discussing the Wake Forest registry, this is in reference to our approved study here at Wake Forest with families, and it's called Characteristics of Individuals with an Inherited Kidney Disease. And if you've enrolled with this study and with our team, you've likely talked to Dr. Blyer and one of our coordinators like Abby, Lauren, or Vicky, signed a consent form, provided medical records, as well as a blood sample or urine sample for our biobank. And it's entitled the Inherited Kidney Disease Study. And it's been ongoing since 2002 with the identification of UMOD as a genetic cause for ADTKD. And families are referred to the study through clinicians, genetic counselors. Families might find us online through searching, trying to get answers for what's going on with their family. And now we also have referrals coming from our KDF, which is wonderful. And this registry is really all encompassing of these referral types. And so we have this large registry of inherited kidney disease families. And then we have a subset from where we're doing genetic, providing genetic testing and identifying patients with ADTKD. And that's, of course, our largest set and what we're focused on talking about today. And these are the ADTKD registry is encompasses families with UMOD or MUC1 mutations. We also have even rare families with RAN and APOA4 mutations. Then also outside of ADTKD, we find families referred to us that have a mild form of polycystic kidney disease or Alport syndrome, amyloid cases. And we also have a growing number of families that present clinically like they have ADTKD, but they have, in fact, mitochondrial variants. But again, we're talking about ADTKD today, right? So as Dr. Blyer also mentioned, being part of our registry is very secure. Physically, the registry is built and hosted on a secure platform called REDCap, and this is HIPAA compliant. And our priority is maintaining the safety and confidentiality of our participants. And your research record, of course, is not connected with your medical records. And the only people who have access to your protected information are team members institutionally approved to have access. Again, any collaborative work outside with other research teams uses anonymous data. We can't even share visit dates because that could potentially calculate back to a date of birth. And also we have in addition to our institutional review board, we have a contracts team here that before we sign any agreement to share data or samples that everything's anonymized. We know what we're sharing, why we're sharing it, and how it's even anonymous data is securely transferred and securely stored on both ends of the agreement. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at our registry for a patient record, we have the ADTKD individual in the center of this. And from that, we have a lot of different types of data that we collect. We have our clinical data that includes your demographics and medical records, family relationships, all the surveys that you collect and complete that goes into our registry. We also have genetic testing information. If you went through Natera and shared that report with us, we capture that. Or if we coordinate testing for UMOD or MUC1, that information goes into this research record. And also any genetic predictors we're looking at, like the GWAS study that Dr. Mabillard talked about yesterday, or BNTR structure studies that we're working on. And then there's also this other area of biomarkers. And so those are physical samples that we have stored in 4 ultra cold freezers here. They're all de-identified sample numbers, and we know what people have, we mark what they collected and what they shared. And when we send that off, the results come back, and all of that goes into this registry to be analyzed. And again, on the foundation side, we also are, making sure we meet all the policies and criteria for, our institutional review board, our Office of Clinical Research, and our contracts administration. Next slide. This slide, I just wanted to show some of the wonderful ADTKD publications that have come out of our registry work, including many collaborations with teams that have presented in this summit. We also have published survey studies that our participants have helped us with, to include a quality of life study of ADTKD patients, maternal health and pregnancy outcome study, and most recently our COVID-19 outcome study. We also work with collaborators to apply what's found in cellular models to patient data to show how that's modeled and what that looks like and how that's, a good tool. We work with international collaborators to clinically describe large cohorts of patients and emphasize the importance of genetic testing and identification of patients with rare disease. And all of this would not be published and would not be known without the participation of ADTKD patients within the Wake Forest Registry. And we're just so grateful to work with you and to learn more about this disease in order to help move forward to future clinical trials. Next slide, please. I quickly wanted to highlight this paper published in 2020 about our outcomes of the Wake Forest Registry. At the time, we had 665 families referred, and we narrowed that down to 257 families that provided samples and had undergone genetic testing for UMOD and MUC1. And we found from those families, 58% of them, or 160, had ADTKD. So then we looked at those families and where did we get these referrals from? And 25% of the families diagnosed with ADTKD, 25% of those were from direct family referrals. And that conclusion and that finding speaks to the power of sharing this information on the internet and empowering patients by, providing direct knowledge that they can contact a team and contact people to find out answers for their families. And so we're now at 1,250 family referrals, and I think it would, next steps in the future would be wonderful to perform this analysis to see the impact of genetic testing with Natera panels, as well as referrals coming to us from our KDF. Next slide for natural history, please. Thank you. So I'm going through all this, and you may wonder how all this works together for knowledge, what we're finding in this registry to fit into the pathway to a clinical trial. And when we look at how a clinical trial is built, of course, there's a lot of organization and planning that goes into it, but at the same time, we have two vital components being, researched at the same time. We have the identification of therapeutic targets and understanding how a drug works on the cellular and organismal level with the Broad Institute's amazing work. And then there's also the work of understanding the natural history of the disease. And that knowledge comes from a registry like the Wake Forest ADTKD registry and the patients who are willing to participate and share your information with us. And so a natural history study is going to describe what we know about the disease, how this looks like in the clinic, what this looks like in patient populations. It describes how it progresses, how it changes with age. How do you account for differences we see and progressions within families? Identifying a biomarker for a trial, because there's a million changes that occur within our bodies. And so how do we choose to monitor something specifically for a trial? So all of these we're looking at trying to find these answers so that when the time comes, that component goes with the amazing drug target and we can begin, going into a clinical trial application. And also a very important part of the natural history study is something our KDF is actively working towards, which is to understand how many people worldwide have ADTKD. And of course, the more individuals identified and participate in the registry will allow us to have a larger trial and a larger pool of eligible participants in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so how to join and why should you join a patient registry? Our team at Wake Forest works directly with ADTKD individuals and families. We also work with international collaborators. We work with the Broad Institute and with Dr. Sayer's team and many teams worldwide. We have ADTKD specific information available. We provide communication about events and cross promote events with RKDF like the summit. You would be part of research that helps explain how ADTKD affects your everyday life and be part of future studies and clinical trials. I can't explain enough or emphasize this enough that every individual's data is extremely important and extremely valuable. And that's why our mission statement is helping one patient, one family at a time. Joining is easy to do. We'd love to talk to you about the study. If you're not currently a participant, or maybe you're wondering if you're part of the registry, maybe you signed your consent form a couple of years ago, please email us or contact RKDF and they'll be sure to get you in contact with us as well. And then next slide, please. This just shows our team and our team's logo. And so this is Dr. Blyer and myself and our family coordinator, Lauren and Abby. And then we have Stephanie Cloud, who joined us in April, Antonio Sanchez, who joined us last January. He works in our lab and helps with genetic testing coordination. And not pictured is our new coordinator, Shariana Vargas, and our biostatistician, Adrian Williams. So thank you, and I'm ready for any questions anybody may have.
Excellent. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment. Kendra, should any questions come in, we'll reach out and then we can post them on the website. Thank you very much for your insightful presentation. I actually learned quite a bit, so thank you for that. It is now time, you guys, for us to take, we were going to plan for a 10-minute break. We're running a little over, so we're going to plan for a 5-minute break. But don't be late, because when we return, we'll be discussing the myths and the realities of genetic testing. So thank you. During this time, please feel free to scan any of the QR codes that you see here on the screen for additional information on our website. We are a nonprofit organization, so donations are always appreciated. Thank you so much. We'll see you in 5 minutes.
Okay, we're back. Thank you for very fascinating presentations, including Kendra, who we work closely with at the Wake Forest Medical Center. This next session is about demystifying genetic testing. And it's really, how do you approach your nephrologist about testing and the pros and cons, and having that essential conversation. You know, the best to facilitate this conversation is Dr. John Sayer. He's a professor of renal medicine at Newcastle University in the UK, 21 years, an academic nephrologist, specializing in studying the genetics and molecular mechanisms underlying renal disease. He's also a member of our new Rare Kidney Disease Foundation Clinical Council, and has given us some very sage advice. John, why don't you take it away? Thank you.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks everyone for being on the call so far. There's a lot of energy here, and I've learned a lot, and I think it's been really, really useful to hear both patient and physician and scientist perspectives over the last couple of days. So I have a task here to introduce two speakers. The first speaker is a recording, actually, so it's Dr. Hila Razuli. She was here speaking live yesterday, but unfortunately is tied up today. So she's kindly given us a recording to watch, which we'll watch, and then we'll move on to the next segment. But Dr. Razuli is assistant professor and former genetics counselor from Columbia University. And so we're going to play her clip now, and then we can have a Q&A after that. Thank you.
Looks like our audio isn't working.
Maybe we can try again.
Are interested in doing genetic tests is to create an informed and appropriate treatment plan, determine eligibility for clinical trials, clarify the etiology, the reason that you developed the disease, and end the diagnostic odyssey, know better about the prognosis, access reproductive options, determine the risk of family members to develop ADTKD, or access a disease community like this one. So you've heard a lot about research for ADTKD, and I'd like to shortly discuss the difference between research and clinical testing. And really, this talk today is focused on the clinical testing. So just to review the differences between the two. So first, the goal of clinical genetic testing is to elucidate the patient's disease etiology, as opposed to genetic research, where the goal is to increase general knowledge. Now, sometimes these two can go together. The genetic test sensitivity and specificity is also very different between clinical test and research test. I would say, in parentheses, the MUC one is kind of the exception to the rule because it is still done in a research setting, but it's really done in a research setting because a clinical test is not yet available. But there is, in general, the sensitivity and specificity to a patient condition is higher with genetic tests done in clinical settings, assuming that the correct test is done. On the research side, if you are not just participating in a research study on let's say, genetics of kidney diseases in general, then MUC1 will not be included in the analysis, and also the sensitivity and specificity of all the genes associated with ADTKD might not be so high. Regarding the results, there is also a very big difference between clinical and research. The results in clinical testing are placed in the medical records, they are shared with the medical team, and they can inform care. Anonymized data might be shared with researchers and pharmaceutical companies, but it depends on the laboratory consent, and it's not the norm to share the data. Usually, there are companies that if they use the data for research, is their internal research inside the same laboratory where you did the test. The results on the genetic research side, on the other side, are not always returned to participants. They're usually not shared with the medical team. They're usually not put in the medical record, and they're not available to your clinicians, to your doctors for care and management. Anonymous data can usually be shared with research collaborators. In the United States, if you are funded by the NIH, it's actually a requirement to share the data with the researchers community. And it's also sometimes shared with pharmaceutical. It depends a lot on the consent. There are now more and more academic centers sharing data, working together, collaborating with pharmaceutical companies. So now focusing on clinical testing, what should you expect from a genetic counseling session with this idea of maybe it is worth going and talk with a genetic counselor or with a nephrologist specialized in genetics? So in a genetic counseling session, your medical history is going to be collected, so the doctor or the genetic counselor can formulate a more specific kidney disease diagnosis, evaluate for any extrarenal features, and determine the kidney disease age of onset and the rate of progression. On the family history, then the family history is collected, usually a 3 generations pedigree, so 3 generations family history. The goal is to assess different inheritance patterns. So it is very important to come with as much information as you can about your family. And it's also important to share when you don't know, as opposed to saying that the person is healthy. Being healthy and you not knowing about the health of a person are very different. And then the doctor or the genetic counselor are going to assess for the etiology of the disease and consider the probability of a diagnosis and which test could be relevant for you. And then there is an informed consent process where the different options are discussed and also the cost are discussed, and then you choose whether you want to undergo genetic testing or not. So going to a genetic counselor doesn't mean that you have to do the test. You can also decide at the end that you don't want to do the test. So I'd like now to focus on genetic tests for asymptomatic individuals. There are 2 main reasons why someone who doesn't present with any kidney symptom would want to do genetic testing. One is healthy family members who just want to know if they are at risk. So in this example of a family tree, as we like to draw them in genetic counseling, with the arrow on the bottom, you can see a man who has a disease. Let's say, in this case, it would be an X-linked disease, and he has a genetic diagnosis now. And then the question is, what are the risks of his sibling brother and his cousins to have the same disease? And so in this case, genetic testing can be offered to answer this question. Another reason to undergo genetic testing when you do not have any symptom is to know whether you are a good, eligible donor. For if you want to donate your kidney to a loved one, part of the transplant evaluation is to know whether you have any kidney disease or not, and genetic testing can be very useful if your loved one has already a genetic diagnosis. You might see here that I did not include minors, so children of people with disease, with ADTKD, for example. So this is because genetic testing of minors is not recommended. The child's best interest is the gold standard in medicine. We want to reach to child's physical and psychosocial well-being. In genetics specifically, we believe that the child has a right for genomic privacy and the right to an open future. They have a right not to know. Genetic testing is actually recommended for minors only if it impacts the child's medical care, which is something that may change in the future. So if a drug in the future will be recommended from before the age of 18, then genetic testing would be recommended. Just wanting to know from the parent's perspective is not enough, is not recognized as a reason to test a minor. And genetic counselors can help with the discussion, especially when the two parents do not agree about that, and you may want to have a mediator, someone who will help you with the discussion. Genetic counselors are a great resource. Broadly, genetic counselors are a good resource for familial communication. It can be hard to share a genetic diagnosis with family members and telling them that they are at risk to develop genetic kidney disease. So genetic counselors can provide resources and guidance on how to share results with at-risk family members. They can write letters to your family members. They can also write letters that are anonymous without telling that you are the person with the genetic disease, but just saying there is someone in your family and they shared your information, and here is the type of genetic variant that was found, and it is recommended for you to get tested. And genetic counselors can facilitate genetic testing of family members. In the United States, there is a law that protects against genetic discrimination. It protects against genetic-based discrimination in two contexts. One is employment, and the other one is health insurance. So the law prohibits employers from requiring, requesting, or conditional approval or employment on the submission of genetic information or family medical history. So that's for both. So that's important for you who, if you did not get genetic testing done, you're also not required. I mean, you are protected by law, and you can tell your employer that you do not want to share family medical history. GINA, which is the name of this law, also protects against health insurance discrimination. So health insurance is not allowed to ask about your genetic information to determine eligibility, the benefits, or the premiums. However, GINA has some limitations. It's only covering for employers with 15 or more employees. It does not include life, long-term care, and disability insurance, and it applies only for pre-symptomatic individuals, with the idea that if you already have a kidney manifestation, then you would be covered by the ADA, the American Disability Act. However, what counts as manifested is not determined, and that can be like a gray area because you might not have a disability, but also may be seen as manifesting the disease already. So I promised to share how to find a genetic counselor. So on the left here in the United States, there is a website developed by the National Society of Genetic Counselors. You can choose if you want to see the genetic counselor in person or by telehealth. And you can also choose specifically genetic counselors who are specialized in nephrology. So you can see a genetic counselor who knows what ADTKD is. In all the other countries on the right, mostly Europe, but not only, there is Orphanet, which is another great resource to find expert centers. So again, a way to meet with providers who know what ADTKD is. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and thanks all my colleagues, and feel free to reach out with any question. My email is listed here. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. I'm glad we got around the technical difficulties. We're going to move swiftly on to our next speaker, Dr. Jacob Nisaya, assistant professor at University of Cincinnati, adult nephrologist like myself. I think then we'll move into a brief Q&A to just talk about, the pros and cons of genetic testing. I think what I've learned about, talking to families is that there's no regular family. Every family has its own idiosyncrasies, and these are fun and also challenging. So over to you, Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Oh, sharing.
Is that okay, Jacob, or would you rather share your own?
I can share my screen so it's easier to maneuver. That would work. Are you able to share or see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
looks good.
All right. Well, first off, I want to say thank you for everybody taking time out of your day and then inviting me to listen and to talk. So my main talk over the next 10 minutes is how do you approach your provider on discussing genetic testing? So starting off, the goal, recognize that genetic testing is an option and an opportunity, not only in diagnosis, but management, and how to approach these conversations with your healthcare provider. So a little brief outline, we're going to review what the basics of genetic testing is. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into a lot of details, as I imagine a lot of us have a little bit of understanding, but maybe a simplified approach. General indications, some risk benefits, and how to talk to your providers is going to be the large chunk of the presentation. So for a blanket case, I have Miss Tara Smith. She's a 32-year-old female who was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. She previously had no health conditions and followed with her routine health visits with her primary care provider. This new diagnosis came out of her most recent visit and some blood tests that she had at that time, and her primary care provider referred her to a nephrologist for further care. After she got this news, she meets with her family and her friends. Of course, getting any kind of diagnosis can come with a lot of different emotions, and she wanted to talk about it. And so after she talks to her family, she learns that her aunt previously passed away, required dialysis at an early age, but really not much else was known as far as that cause go. And when speaking to her friends, one of her friends brought up the idea of genetic testing after an advertisement was seen when accompanying her family member at a recent appointment. So what is genetic testing? Just very plainly put, genetic testing is looking at genetic changes, sometimes called mutations or variants in your DNA that can cause a disease or other healthcare conditions. We can get this through inheritance or sporadic, meaning passed down or changed on its own. Now, again, I told you I wasn't going to go into too much of the detail on the basics of genetics, but we can see from a science perspective here that our DNA is the building blocks of what makes you you. It makes us all human, but it also tells us why I'm different to the person to my right and the person to my left. And the way that I generally try to describe it is our genetics is like a book, and each chromosome that we have is a chapter. Each page has a sentence, and each sentence adds on that building blocks that makes us individuals. And with that, the simple way that we can walk through that is a sentence being the cat ran down the hall, the cat ran down the tall doesn't make as much sense, or maybe the cat ran down the ball where it can still make some sense, but may not be the same, or the cat ran down the blank and it stops there. So generally speaking, what are the indications of genetic testing? The guidance that we have are family history, unclear etiology of CKD, whether it's a guiding therapy decisions, an unusual course, a young onset, or extrarenal manifestations. Again, very similarly put in a more graphical standpoint. Benefits of genetic testing. Again, the overview, we can often get to a precise diagnosis, can potentially early detect in affected family members, prognostication, whether it's before in the course itself, or even during and post-transplantation on how our body would handle a transplant. Prevention of ineffective and harmful treatments, targeted therapy options, and then recognition and management of extrarenal manifestations. And one big benefit that I tend to point out to a lot of my providers, but I also mention to my patients as well, is that a genetic diagnosis has led to a reclassification of what the original suspicion was, about 50% of cases, and has changed management in up to 90% of cases. That's a pretty profound impact as far as percentages go. What are some of the risks with genetic testing? Again, any kind of diagnosis, as I mentioned, can be met with a lot of different emotions about self or family, availability and cost depending on region, access to genetic experts, inconclusive results, no treatments available, implications not necessarily on employment, but life insurance, disability, insurance that were previously mentioned, and then the effect on other family members. So when going into an appointment, the always thing I want to do is get a detailed history. Family history is important, no matter what it is, whether it's kidney disease, high blood pressure, anything that may, even if it doesn't seem clinically or relevant at all, still try to obtain that history if you're able to. Identify your concerns. What is my concern walking in the appointment, whether it be about kidney disease, whether it be about genetic testing. Think about it beforehand on maybe what are the concerns that we have overall. Okay. Genetic testing, we want to be familiar with what genetic testing is, why we're doing it, and what the available benefit, what's the purpose and potential outcomes. Again, some of those that were previously mentioned. And then really consider your values. So in our patient, the day comes of the appointment. Tara is very nervous about the appointment, but at the advice of her friend, she feels like she's ready for her visit. So her question is, how can I get the most out of my appointment? So during your visit, I want you to be open and honest. Be very transparent. It's a two-way street in communication. And we really want you to share your concerns. Explain why you're considering genetic testing, or those individuals that we might be trying to assist, have them explain why. Ask specific questions. Based on my family history and current condition, do you think genetic conditions or genetic testing is appropriate for me? Listen carefully. Don't hesitate to ask for any clarification. I think this one is number one, what I highlight to my patients as best as I can. If you don't understand, always ask. Always ask. Take notes. And then consider bringing a support person, whether it's a friend or a family member. So as mentioned, here's a couple of example questions of what we could provide. So what does genetic testing involve? How are these results interpreted? Will I have access to a genetic counselor and support? And a few others listed that I'll leave up for just a second. Now, what are some alternative options? I'm optimistic or hopeful we've never had a negative encounter with any provider or any barriers, but but I'm also a little bit more realistic as well. So availability or cost of genetic testing. So what additional resources are through the companies, whether it's a commercial company genetic testing, whether it's through the institution? Is there an option for research to help find out a particular side from that overall? And then is there any other centers that are available nearby that might have that testing? And then providers being unfamiliar with genetic testing. Are there any providers in the group that can assist for review? Can I have a referral to a center familiar with genetic conditions or a geneticist? Having inherited disease, rare disease, or genetic disease clinics, and genetic counseling. So genetic counseling, as you mentioned, is I think very underutilized, whether it's pre, during, or even after your visit and results. And always a second opinion is an option. So follow up after testing. Again, follow up with your nephrologist to discuss these results. Again, be open, seeking genetic counseling that is available, whether it be through the sites that are that he had provided a few moments ago, whether it be through the institution or maybe even some of the companies are able to offer some genetic counseling. So briefly, in summary, genetic testing is an option that can help be able to diagnose and find treatment, potentially find these answers. Come prepared as best as you can. Be open and honest with yourself and your provider. Don't be afraid to ask. And genetic counselors are our friends and can help beyond just genetic testing. And again, I want you to take time, and maybe we've already been through this process ourselves, but it might not be a family member. It may be a friend being in the community and help advocating for your patients. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. So we're open to Q&A, but just to kick one off for you, Jacob, say you've seen a patient, you've consented and counseled them about the test, and you get the test result back. What do you think the best way is to deliver that information back to the patient? Do you write? Do you phone them? What do you do?
Yeah, so I try to have them follow up as soon in person as possible. I know that's not always there's a lot of barriers there itself, but I personally give them a phone call. I think having that voice, having that connection from that visit is a lot better than reading a text message or a MyChart message or another way of notification. So my personal way is having these patients come back. Let's talk about it in person, or at worst case scenario, we're going to discuss this over the phone.
Great. There's a question online. Maybe you can give a short answer, maybe point to some resources, but the question really concerns what you mentioned about life insurance. Are there resources to help patients navigate concerns regarding insurance and what to tell their insurance provider following a genetic diagnosis?
No, so as far as I'm aware, with life insurance companies, I don't believe there's any resources that are openly out there for discussing. A lot of times, this is going to be more for when you're applying for life insurance or disability insurance ahead of time, not necessarily for medical insurance in that purpose.
So maybe that's a resource or a gap that we could do as a patient group here to provide that information. So we'll come back to that questionnaire on the web pages. There's another question here. Should I apply for insurance before genetic testing?
Yeah, I would recommend, whether if I would recommend doing that before genetic testing. But to me, if getting a treatment option is a little bit more pressing on the individual person, then going forward with that, it's again an individualized basis. But I would recommend going ahead and pursuing that beforehand.
I think there's maybe just time for this one final question from me is, what is your advice, or what do you do in this scenario where you've cancelled someone for a test, you've sent the tests away, maybe you've done a panel for UMOD and MUC1, and the results all come back negative, and so then you're left with the scenario, well, we're still got this disease that's unexplained. What's your approach then?
Yep. So the next approach is I want to, if depending on what the panel is are we able to identify any other variables that could be contributing, maybe not just MUC1 or UMOD, but if we have a fairly broad panel to start with and giving us an idea, then going to the next step of I'm very concerned that there is a genetic component to this, and looking either at whole exome or whole genome sequencing for there in that area as my personal next step.
Great. Okay, thanks, Jacob, and thanks to Hila as well that we had the video from. So I'm handing back to Richard now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent session, John. You always give sage advice. I've valued you as we've gotten to know each other, and to Jacob and Hila, thank you. Fascinated about the next topic, obtaining genetic testing. From a patient standpoint and from a father's standpoint, my advice would be get all the insurance you can before you have genetic testing. You can always cancel it. You can always cut it down and do it at a different level. But just, that's one piece of advice that I've picked up over the years. We're eager now to understand better genetic testing, how to broach this topic. We've just gotten advice from our friend the nephrologist, and let's discover the nuts and bolts of obtaining genetic testing. We have two insights on this. First of all, Bonnie, who's a registered nurse. She's a RKD volunteer and an ADTKD patient. She has long and insightful insights on being diagnosed or not being diagnosed, and she'll give us some great advice and insights. Go ahead, Bonnie. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, and I appreciate all of you for taking the time to listen today. And I did wear my green. Thanks, Sharon, for the reminder. So both of my parents passed away on dialysis. My mom was diagnosed with chronic kidney disease when she was 52 years of age, and my father was in his 80s. So I'm not really sure where the gene came from. My mom was told that she had polycystic kidney disease, and my father was told he had uncontrolled blood pressure and renal artery stenosis. So then when I was in college, I was tested and told I was negative. So, I just went along my merry way until about 2019. I just had routine blood work done with my primary care doctor, and my labs came back and I saw that my eGFR was 72. So usually it only says above 60. So I was kind of surprised, as I'm a pretty healthy person. So I talked to my primary care doctor and he ordered more labs. Then he ordered a renal ultrasound, vascular ultrasound. Everything looked good. So he's like, well, we're gonna just keep monitoring this. And, so I went about my merry way. And then finally in 2022, I saw more lab work and I'm like, my eGFR is continuing to decline, and it's starting to stress me out because I saw both my parents on dialysis and I really did not want to go that way. So I was trying to figure out what was I doing wrong? So I took it upon myself to schedule an appointment with a nephrologist. Very nice doctor, ordered tons more labs, more ultrasounds. And then he was thinking maybe it was anemia with borderline hypertension. So he gave me medication, said to come back in 6 months. So unfortunately, he left the Cleveland Clinic and he moved to another state. So they switched me to a new provider who was very nice, but he was very focused on blood pressure and getting a biopsy. And so I even had one scheduled, canceled a few days before, as I was concerned with complications, as I've had like bleeding problems in the past. So at this point, I'm starting to become a little neurotic and checking my blood pressure numerous times a day and like writing it down. I mean, I had papers and papers of my blood pressure because I would go in the doctor's office, and because I was so anxious, it was one of those things that it was always high. And they'd be like, "Oh, it's your blood pressure." I'm like, "Oh, I swear when I'm at home, it's not." And so that's one thing I was going to add to Jacob's thing is if you're not comfortable with your doctor, you can switch. Like they work for you. So if you're like going in and you're like, "Oh, like dreading these appointments," you need to find someone that you're comfortable with. So over the summer, I'm a nurse at university hospitals, and so one of the doctors had also kidney issues. So I asked him, do you have someone you can recommend? So of course the wait list was 6 months to get an appointment with her with university hospitals. She's a wonderful person. Like as soon as I got there, I felt like she was actually listening to me, her concerns. She was like really like asking a lot of questions. And so the first thing she said was, we should do genetic testing. So she already had the box and she just handed it to me and she's like, take this home, mail it the next day. So 3 weeks later, I got an email and I had the diagnosis of UMOD. So of course that day I read every single article that was ever written. And thankfully I also found the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation. So it's not the result I was hoping for, but I'm glad I finally have a diagnosis and this amazing resource from the RKDF. And I look forward to volunteering my time and helping others in my shoes. And then I also, like throughout this, wondered why not one doctor recommended genetic testing with both my parents having kidney disease. So another thing that I want to bring up is since 2019, I have spent almost $20,000 in lab work, ultrasounds, appointment with specialists. When I feel like if genetic testing was offered to me a few years ago, maybe we would have known what was going on.
Very tough situation you've been in, Bonnie.
Yes.
We love your story and love you and your involvement with our foundation to reach out to other patients. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, and I can't wait for us to start educating nephrologists.
And you'll get after it. I know that.
Yes, I am definitely ready.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll introduce Maggie Westermeyer, a genetic counselor and director of clinical genetic services in Oregon Health at Natera, a large genetic testing organization that we've come to know and value. She manages teams of genetic counselors, perform research, and help clinicians and patients understand their genetic test results and next steps. Maggie, it's great to have you.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be here today. And thank you so much, Bonnie, for sharing your story. It's a story of genetic counselors that we hear, quite frequently, that the diagnostic odyssey is often long and drawn out and pricey, right? In some cases before you get an answer. So many of the topics I have here in my few slides today have been covered pretty nicely already by Hila and Dr. Neisser. So thank you so much. I will just, go over some practical information about how to obtain genetic testing. Next slide, please. So genetic testing for kidney disease, right? You know that it's in your family, or you know that you have signs and symptoms of a kidney disease that your doctor has identified, and you've decided that you want to pursue genetic testing, but you might be wondering how, right? So we know that genetic testing to diagnose kidney disease is ordered by a clinician, right? So any healthcare provider can order genetic testing, and these tests are ordered by, at a genetic testing laboratory. So here we'll discuss how to obtain genetic testing from different types of providers and really how either testing can be patient-driven or provider-driven, even though it requires a licensed healthcare provider, at least at this stage of the game, to order genetic testing. And then this healthcare provider is the person who's generally responsible for communicating the test results to you and discussing next steps. Next slide, please. So really the first, as we were just hearing, the first step is that you need to start a conversation, right? That you need to start that conversation with your healthcare provider, or in some cases, they may identify, that the risk is present in you and be interested in ordering genetic testing. So this can be, a nephrologist or even a primary care provider where this discussion point starts. So if someone's not currently seeing a nephrologist but has kidney disease or a family history of kidney disease and has a desire for testing, you can ask to be referred for evaluation. Most commonly, in terms of kidney genetic testing, we see this ordered by nephrologists for someone with kidney disease, but it's a perfectly reasonable indication to be evaluated and tested when there's a known genetic condition in your family, particularly if someone in the family has already had testing and has that mutation identified in the causative gene for the disease in your family. We also, of course, know that genetic testing can be ordered by a medical geneticist or a genetic counselor in the setting of a medical genetics clinic. So really, when we think about the different scenarios, I tried to think here, like, what are the paths that someone could take to end up getting genetic testing when they're not certain? So the most straightforward scenario is that you're referred to a nephrologist and you see a nephrologist who's comfortable ordering genetic testing and communicates the results to you once they're available, and then manages your kidney health care based on the results of those tests. Next slide, please. But in reality, we might have scenarios where, your nephrologist isn't comfortable ordering, doesn't really know how to order genetic testing. Fortunately, that's becoming more common for nephrologists to engage with genetic testing, but you may not encounter that in your clinic. So it's important to know that you have options and to support yourself here. So believe it or not, you can reach out to a genetic testing laboratory in a number of cases to ask for a testing kit that they will ship to your home, even though this still requires the clinician to order the test. So if you get this kit, just like Vani was describing, you bring this to your nephrologist who can then work with the laboratory to complete testing. Sometimes you can introduce that laboratory information to your clinician and they can view their website and the information about the testing. Most laboratories offer phone support with information about the testing that the nephrologist can learn about, or through a sales representative for that laboratory. So there's a number of avenues for nephrologists to become educated. If you approach them and they still need to learn more before being ready to order testing. But if that doesn't work out, you can talk with either that doctor or, collaborate with your community to find a nephrologist who commonly orders genetic testing and will take you as a patient. And then in the next case, you can ask to be referred to a genetics clinic. You can take a different path that will eventually circle back to nephrology. So you can ask to be referred to a genetics clinic to either see a geneticist or a genetic counselor who can then order the testing and work with your nephrologist once results are complete. So just as an example, when we're referred patients in genetic counseling, right, we summarize everything in a letter back to your clinician that we've discussed. When we take that family history, when we order testing, all of those results are communicated back to your primary nephrology provider or your primary care provider, whomever your care provider is, so that they have all the information. And really, in perhaps rarer cases, if you have a close relationship with your primary care provider and aren't seeing a nephrologist or haven't been referred for genetic counseling, it may be possible that your primary care provider may be willing to order the testing. We're starting to see a little bit more of this. And then based on those results, refer out to either genetics or nephrology, whether they're positive or negative results. You can empower your nephrologist to understand the benefits of genetic testing. So genetic testing can help you not only understand how your genes might impact your kidney health, but they can also help determine a more personalized treatment plan for you and let you know if your family members are at risk for kidney disease. And as we heard earlier, that can impact all sorts of things like family planning, understanding who in the family is eligible for donation, should you need a transplant, and those sorts of things. It's important for you to educate your provider and to educate yourself that genetic testing is generally covered by insurance. And there's remaining myths, I want to say, in the medical community that genetic testing is expensive like it was in the old days. But now genetic testing has, really come to be reduced in cost. And so even if insurance doesn't pay for testing, most laboratories have an out-of-pocket price that's in the several $100 range that's generally affordable for testing. And then most laboratories also offer a reduced cost or free testing program using their compassionate care program, where you provide some income information, some financial information to the laboratory, and then they may have a sliding fee scale based on that, which can really, make the test even more affordable. So understanding that those barriers can be removed, and some of those fears about the cost and what to do with the information, it's also important for nephrologists to know that they can be supported often by the genetic testing laboratory when they have questions about the results. So, when I say here, what's next? What if my nephrologist and I are not certain about the meaning of results? This is where the genetics community can step in, and that can be through an academic medical center where genetic counselors are present. It can also, for example, in my case, I work for the laboratory and I have a team of 7 genetic counselors where, all that we do is renal genetics. And so we counsel patients and clinicians about the meaning of their test results to help support nephrologists in making good care decisions, and see what other, workup and healthcare might be needed for patients with a genetic kidney disease identified. So as mentioned before, you can seek genetic counseling and find a local genetic counselor on the National Society of Genetic Counselors website listed here, and they have a Find a Counselor feature there. And as in our case, and perhaps in the case of some other laboratories, the lab may offer complimentary genetic counseling services. Genetic counselors can help with understanding test results by providing easy to understand information, including the health benefits and planning for testing in family members or future children. We can help coordinate genetic testing for family members and help you communicate the information. I know Gila already went through this in her recorded messages to you today about, this is really something that genetic counselors specialize in, is helping people communicate information to family members, whether that's verbally or through like a family letter with information that can be identified or even de-identified to help other family members understand their options for testing and their risks. I think those are all my slides. Thank you.
Excellent. Kathy, questions?
Okay. Thank you, Maggie. This question is for you. Do you know, or do you think that transplant centers will start testing donors for genetic kidney diseases?
Yes, and that does already go on to an extent. One principle that we should really focus on and be aware of is that in order for a donor to be worked up, though, appropriately, the affected family member, the person who's going to have the transplant, really needs to have the genetic testing first. Because if you test for something in a donor, but you don't know what you're testing for, and it comes back negative, right? Meaning a genetic change wasn't found. We don't know if that donor has the familial disease or not, right? So if you don't test that person who has the kidney disease first and identify the genetic mutation in them, you're at a disadvantage. So there's this kind of a different question, like I'm answering your question in a little bit of a different way, in that yes, but the stepwise process would be testing the affected individual first. If a mutation is found in them, if this is a related donor we're talking about, then yes, screening them for that family mutation is very important.
Thank you. The next question is a two-part question. Does Natera offer a sliding scale cost program? And then,
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry, I'll ask you the other question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Yes, we do.
Oh.
Yes, and so anyone would be welcome to reach out to the customer service to discuss how that works. Yes.
Then I would say my insurance actually did cover this test, unlike all my other blood work and everything else that wasn't covered in the genetic testing was. So that was nice.
That's great.
Yeah, it's very commonly covered.
And then the next part of that question was, how long does it take to receive the results of the genetic testing?
Yeah, in around 3 weeks or less.
Next question is, what is your experience of unexpected findings on genetic testing? For example, a cancer gene being found incidentally.
Great question. So when laboratories design testing, it can be quite varied, right? So you can have something like a test for a single gene or a single mutation that's known in your family to be the causative gene or mutation, all the way up to a whole exome where we're analyzing every, functional gene, right, to look for changes throughout the genome. Generally speaking, the principles of genetics are that we order the least amount of testing to identify, to be focused on the condition that someone's presenting with. So for example, I recognize that I represent a laboratory that offers a renal genetic test, and we offer a broad panel of 397 genes that cause kidney disease, but those are meant to be just genes that cause kidney disease so that we're reducing this risk of incidental findings where you find out about a cancer risk or some other, type of risk that you weren't hoping to find out about. So those are the discussions that you would have in a pre-test setting with your provider, or certainly with a genetic counselor, about the risks and benefits and limitations and things about like incidental findings prior to choosing testing.
Thank you. The next question, I think, is for Maggie. Will insurance cover the cost of genetic testing if I am asymptomatic with no family history of kidney disease?
They may or they may not. So in those, in general, you have to have some sort of diagnosis, like a family history or kidney disease to have coverage, but that's something you can investigate with your insurance company. I think I want to just add to that, though, that in the current state, again, where many years ago this may not have been the case, if someone's interested in having that having genetic testing, where insurance doesn't pay, the fees can still be reasonable at laboratories for self-pay.
Okay. The next question is for Bonnie. Was your insurance affected by your results?
So I just found my results out in January. So I have not had any issues yet.
Okay. Thank you. That's all the questions that I have right now.
I've got a question, Maggie.
Yes.
I understand that from our experience together at ASN in San Diego, when you commented that there have been 400 UMOD patients that have been diagnosed before we got involved with you. Can you comment on that? And what's your guess as to whether some or all of them got into a registry like the International ADTKD registry?
Sure. So I do know that Natera has tested over 140,000 patients to date for genetic kidney disease. And when I looked the other day before our presentation, it looks like we've had about 480 folks identified with a UMOD mutation. So that number does continue to grow. We don't have follow-up as a laboratory. We don't have clinical follow-up with all of our patients, right? Obviously, to know. So when we talk about, we see a small percent of patients that seek out our genetic counseling services following testing. So I can't say for sure how many end up in a registry.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, we as a foundation are
Yeah.
eager and anxious to get as many
Yeah.
of those patients into a registry to advance the
What I
treatment.
can
clinic
say,
work.
and that Rich and team here are well aware of, is that we do try to provide, and most laboratories do, right? Try to provide educational materials once a positive result is obtained. So at the end of our report, we'll have what we call a supplement that's like an FAQ all about the condition, that's written somewhere between the patient and the clinician level so that everybody can understand all of the implications of that diagnosis. And then there's resources. So the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation is listed on our supplement when someone has a positive result for UMOD, for example.
As we've worked with your team, where does the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation fit on that list of resources? I know the
It's number one on the list.
number one, of course.
Yes.
In a link. Okay, I think that covers a fantastic Q&A and fantastic presentations. And again, Bonnie, thank you for your personal story about having to go it alone for $20,000 for 6 years. And
Rich, we have one more question, please, for Maggie.
okay, one more.
If a gene panel was negative 5 years ago, is it worth rerunning the gene tests as the panel might be expanded since the 5-year period?
That's a wonderful question, and the answer will be unique to you and your family history and what you were tested for previously. So that's where you know, if there's a gene for a condition that wasn't on a panel that is now, yes, it may be worth retesting, right? But really it just varies on what someone's family and medical history and what the prior testing involved. So yes, there do continue to be incremental improvements to genetic testing over time, and in some cases, retesting is a worthwhile endeavor.
Thank you.
Stay on just for a minute. Do you have advice? Earlier we heard from one of our panelists that they had parents with 14 siblings. And that used to happen a lot. I have a great-grandfather that caused a lot of I don't know if it was a spontaneous mutation back in Denmark in the 1850s, but he had 10 other siblings. Well, death records aren't very accurate. How do you track back? Do you have any advice, either of you specifically, on how do you track back? I've actually got a suggestion, but anything from the two of you?
I think I'm going to answer your question in a little bit of a different way, Rich, because we tend to want to reassure patients that just because you don't know everything about your family history doesn't mean you're ineligible for genetic testing, right? So even if we don't, this is partly why when we offer our renal genetics test, it's a broad panel that encompasses many different types of kidney disease to be sure we're casting a wide net to make a diagnosis when we can. And that seems to be working. So I think I want to reassure folks that not everyone knows their family history. But if you have early onset kidney disease, signs and symptoms of a kidney disease that your clinician feels are likely to be genetic, that genetic testing may still be reasonable.
Okay, that's
and
great.
Important.
Here's a suggestion. There's an organization called FamilySearch.org that puts on a conference called RootsTech. This year they had 5 million viewers over their 3-day conference with, I don't know, 250 different classes. That's a free resource. There are billions of records that you can search, and it ties in directly with Ancestry.com, also a Utah-based company. 23andMe has gone through some serious problems. And so I would personally recommend, that's how we have tracked our family back into Denmark. My brother actually wants me to go knock on doors in Denmark in a little village to find Rasmus Nielsen and some of his siblings that don't have accurate reported records. But I think it's really important to find. Also, my brother Steve at one point wanted to exhume some of the graves to do DNA testing. I think Dr. Blyer said, whoa, 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 hold it. You don't need to do that. So there are ways to do that. And really, this community called the Rare Kidney Disease Foundation is that kind of resource. So we greatly appreciate you both participating and great advice and today. Let me wrap up now. Thank you very, very much, both Vonnie and Maggie. With that, we're going to be sending you a QR code tomorrow. And it's a 3-minute survey. We need to hear from you. This is really why the reason is this is why we exist. We need to hear from our fellow patients of what we could do in the future, what we could do better. We try to limit it to what we're trying. There it is. Thank you, Sharon. By the way, Sharon is our executive director and has done just a stellar job on this conference for this summit with our stellar team. But if you'll take a picture of that QR code, it'll bring up a 3-minute survey and about what we went through today, very specifically. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much, Sharon. Also, the picture earlier was a family picture that Anna Greca participated in back in 2016. It was a celebration of my father's 100th birthday, although he was long gone, on the shores of a beautiful lake in Idaho and Utah. And, as I look at that, I had no idea that there would be at least 8 to 10 of those in the picture that would shortly have failing kidney disease. And so it breaks my heart. I hope that each of those families is pursuing some kind of avenue to deal with that. And we've made we've given a lot of information about genetic testing. Hopefully nephrologists will get that word as part of this and yesterday's session, because we really need to find enough patients for this clinical trial that's coming up. It sounds like within the next 2 years, as Anna talked about. Again, we'd love to hear from you. I want to thank all the panelists and moderators for sharing their valuable time and expertise over the last 2 days. Again, I really do have a stellar team and incredible foundation partners like you've heard from. The Rare Kidney Disease volunteers, Sharon has really been leading our team this past year, working to achieve our 3 priorities. Suzanne Kelly, Sue Real, Kathy Stankus. Wow, thank you. Thank you for your hard work in developing and executing this tremendous summit. They've done the heavy lifting. I hate to admit this, I was actually out of the country until just recently, and they've gotten me up to speed. So thank you. I really appreciate it. Social media and advertising efforts of the foundation volunteers. It was led by volunteer Lisa Parcell and Christine Upton and Joe Mordell and Joe's fantastic team at the TMV group. Also, we've had thought leadership help us, provided by our partners, Kathleen Blakesley, and a foundation board member, Tony Blyer and Kendra and Stephanie from the Rare Inherited Kidney Disease Research Team, at Wake Forest, and Katie LaQuarrie at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Again, before you go, please, we're ending 5 minutes early. Please fill out that survey, and we greatly appreciate your participation. Now help us with your candid feedback. With that, we'll end a little early and have a wonderful weekend, wonderful Saturday. Thank you on behalf of the foundation.